it's Arielle. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you guys are all doing well. Buckle up because today I have another mini history lecture on the city of Paris for you, specifically about the Opera House, the Palais Garnier. This is such an amazing building in France. Truly, I could talk about the topic of the opera for hours. There's just so much rich information when it comes to the history of this building, the architecture, the interior design, the purpose of the opera house over the years. So I truly could talk about this for hours, but instead of doing that, what I thought I would do is I would share a couple interesting stories and anecdotes that I've picked up along the way. As you guys know, I'm in the process of building all of my Paris itineraries, and so I have taken several tours of the Opera House, and I just thought I would share the most interesting tidbits of information and stories that I've picked up along these tours. So if you're interested in Paris, if you're interested in history, if you are interested in the Palais Garnier, then this is going to be the video for you. Now, before we had the Opera House that we know and love today, we had La Salle Louvois, which was opened in 1791. But when the Duke of Berry was assassinated upon exiting this theater in 1820, Louis XVIII ordered its complete destruction. So that was our first opera house. Now, in the interim, while we were waiting for a more permanent opera house, the architect François Debray built the Pelletier, which really was meant as just a stand-in until something more concrete was built. In 1860, a contest was launched and 171 applicants submitted their designs, but ultimately on the 30th of May in 1861, it was the 35-year-old architect Charles Garnier who won, and the Opera House was inaugurated almost 15 years later in 1874. Now, one of the first points that I think we need to touch on is the fact that every single space inside of the Palais Garnier was designed in a way to be its own stage. So the stage wasn't only in the performance hall, but it really was the entire building. And people who came to the opera were expected, in a sense, to be part of the pre-opera show. And what I mean by this is that people came to the opera not just to watch a performance, but they came to socialize, to find a husband, to do business, to network, and your personal appearance was a direct reflection of your success. And it wasn't just your personal appearance, it was also the appearance of your wife, for example. Whether or not she was wearing an expensive dress with expensive jewelry was very much an indicator as to whether or not you were a wealthy and successful businessman. So there was a huge emphasis put on the personal appearance of everyone who was entering the opera, and the Palais Garnier was designed in a way to highlight the personal appearance. And one of the biggest examples that we have of this is the members only area, which is on the bottom level of the opera house. So when the opera was opened, the wealthiest members of society could pay to be members. And what this meant is that not only did you have your own personal entrance into the opera and your own reserved cloakroom, but you also had access to this circular sitting room that was very large, and the walls were completely lined with mirrors. And the point of this room was for the wealthiest opera goers to be able to retouch their jewelry, their hair, their dress, make sure everything is perfect before they walk out onto the pre-opera stage. Because when you exit this members-only area, you walk into the Great Hall with this huge white marble staircase that sort of forks off into the Grand Foyer. And so you can imagine women in their most beautiful gowns and their sparkliest jewels gliding up this staircase for everyone to see. And so truly the design of this opera house in every single aspect is meant so that a show can be put on, whether it's the actors and the performers or the attendees themselves. Now, when you enter the actual performance hall in itself, it is sheer opulence. You are met with this sea of red velvet and this gold decor, and you have this 7-ton bronze chandelier hanging from the ceiling, which in and of itself has caused much debate over the years On screen, I put a picture of the original painting of the ceiling done by Jules Eugène Leneveux. That's on the right side. And then you have Marc Chagall's 1964 version on the left side. He was commissioned to paint this in 1964 by the Minister of Culture, who wanted kind of a facelift for the Opera House. He wanted a more contemporary piece of art installed in the main theater area. And this ceiling has caused much debate. It's hard to see from the photos, but truly the colors of Marc Chagall's version are very vibrant, almost highlighter-like red, blue, yellow, and green. And so it can be a little bit jarring to walk into a space that feels very antique, very old, and then look up at the ceiling and be met with these vibrant primary colors. So it's definitely caused debate as to whether or not the original or the current version is the better version. But not to worry, either way, whichever one you prefer, both versions are still intact. Chagall's version was just painted on top of a frame that was placed over top of the original ceiling. So both are still intact. Nothing was lost. Another point to mention about the ceiling and the giant chandelier that hangs from it is that during a performance in 1896, one of the counterweights of the chandelier actually broke and killed a concierge. And this was the inspiration for the scene in The Phantom of the Opera where the chandelier comes crashing down at the end of Act 1. Now, there is a secret room in the Opera House that was very intriguing to me because you truly cannot access it. You don't have the opportunity, no matter what tour you go on, to see this room, and that would be the Foyer de la Danse, and this is where performers rehearse before the show. But what makes this foyer so intriguing, I guess you could say, is that when the membership program was still in operation, like 100 years ago, paying members could actually come into the Foyer de la Danse before a performance and talk with the dancers. And I'm sure we can all imagine what likely very explicit things went on here between the wealthy men and the young and beautiful dancers. And the reason that I mention this is because recently on another tour that I took of the Musée d'Orsay, I came across this statue called La Danse by Jean-Baptiste Carpeaux, and it was actually commissioned to be put outside of the entrance of the Palais Garnier. And what you see are a bunch of dancers dancing naked in a circle. And this sculpture was essentially an advertisement for the form of prostitution that was going on inside the Palais Garnier and the Foyer de la Danse. So it was a very scandalous sculpture at the time. Now I want to show you guys this photo that I took of a model of the Palais Garnier that you can see in the Musée d'Orsay. And I think it's so intriguing to be able to see the skeleton of the Opera House, if you will. And it's so funny because when you walk into the Grand Hall of the Opera, it feels massive. You couldn't imagine anything bigger than the Grand Hall. And this model shows you that that's the smallest part of the whole Opera House. It just is such a massive building. So you have the Grand Hall at the front there, followed by the Red Velvet Theater, we have the stage, and then all the way on the left-hand side, that is the Foyer de la Danse. And then if we move towards the bottom of the Opera House, we see that there is sort of this underground network of tunnels, this underground lake, if you will. And I know the Phantom of the Opera definitely exaggerates the use and the purpose and even the design of this lake, but there is some truth to the fact that there is an artificial lake underneath the opera, and actually it is a very important aspect of the structural integrity of this building because during construction, Charles Garnier found that the land that they were building this opera house on was incredibly swampy, incredibly marshy, and the building, if something wasn't done, would be under constant threat of humidity and flooding. And so what he chose as a solution was to build this watertight concrete tank that would resist the pressure of the water from coming up and would also stabilize the building at the same time. There was a third benefit of adding in this water tank. It was that if ever there was a fire in the Opera House, the firefighters could directly use the water from this tank to put it out. So all that to say, there is some truth to the lake under the Opera House. Whether or not a phantom lives there is another story. So I think that's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed learning a couple interesting stories about the Palais Garnier. Let me know if you want a part 2. I truly could talk about the opera forever. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you learned something new about Paris, and I'll see you guys in the next one.